Welcome to Debate is Jericho! Wow, this place is packed. Love it. I do need a Grey Goose on the rocks, though. Let's just start off on a good step here. And just so you know, to eliminate the questions right off the bat, I'm number 31 in the Rumble today. So you guys ready? This is the first time this has ever been done before. We've never had this. We've never seen anything like this. For the first time ever, it is the great debate. Pritchard versus Bischoff, debating the Monday Night Wars. So you guys are here to see the first one ever. First one. Congratulations. What better place to be than here in Philadelphia? The craziest fucking fans ever. I guess I should have asked if we can cuss, if we can swear. So apparently we can. So there you go. So we're just going to come up here and debate. We're going to have some conversations. Bruce and Eric will be talking about all the stuff that happened in the Monday Night Wars. We're going to do things a little bit differently here, though. If you hear something that you're very interested in, that you want to add to or want to ask another question about, throughout the debate, we'll give you guys a chance to ask the question. So if you have something, you might want to raise your hand. I might point to you, I might not. If I don't worry about it. If I do, then ask your question nicely. Don't ask stupid questions, or I will tell you that you asked a stupid question and cut you off. Because I can do that because I have a microphone. And you don't. So that's the thing. Well, like I said, we're just going to do this and see where it takes us and see where it goes and have some fun. So, you guys all ready? Yeah! It's something I hate that Vince always says, and I'm going to say it right now. So, without further ado, let's bring out the first debater here today. He was the right-hand man of Vince McMahon during the Monday Night Wars. He is the one and only Bruce Pritchard. Actually, I think Bruce and Eric are going to need microphones. Mr. Soundman. All right, he's like, yeah, I'll get him when I'm ready. So don't fucking worry about it. The other member of the famous debate, he was the head of WCW, the president of WCW, the man behind Monday Night Nitro. He is Eric Bischoff! So this is the Monday Night Wars debate. Let's just jump right in. So it's 1994, and the WWE basically has just started Raw, maybe a year before that. If I get some of the actual details wrong or dates wrong, don't crucify me. But basically, Raw is on the air, and it's the first time that the WWE has gone basically a primetime show during the week. This is not on Saturday mornings anymore, or Saturday night's main events, or specials. It's a weekly show. Every Monday on the USA Network. It's getting a lot of steam, and it was basically the first time that you'd ever seen top line matches on a weekly basis. So you at this point are just taking over WCW, just getting the call to be the president.
Yeah, I think it started probably in late 1993, but by 1994 I was executive producer, I believe, and it kind of quickly moved up the food chain, so to speak. But yeah, 94 was when I first started having some control.
So what was the mindset in starting Nitro and putting it up against Raw? Because at the time, that was a suicidal move, a lot of people thought, because Raw was WWE, and it was huge, and WCW was the real redheaded stepchild, second place company at that point in time.
You know, I'd like to take credit for the one having made the decision to go head-to-head with WWE, because that was a ballsy move. But it had nothing to do with me, or my strategy, or my mindset, quite frankly. It was really a decision that Ted Turner made, spontaneously, as far as I was concerned, to put WCW right up against Raw. And
So that was Turner's idea.
It was Ted Turner's idea.
So because he owned the network, he's the one that was able to do that and make the decision. So he's telling you that, Eric, we're going to put this show on head-to-head. What was your thought about that?
I grabbed, you know, I just, you know, I originally, I was in a meeting with Ted Turner and Scott Sassa, who was the head of all of the networks at the time, and Harvey Schiller, who was my boss. And I had actually asked for the meeting because I wanted to talk about expanding WCW's programming internationally with Star TV. Star TV was owned by Rupert Murdoch. Ted Turner and Rupert Murdoch didn't get along so much. So I had to get Ted's blessing in order to do that deal, which is why I was in that meeting. And about 30 seconds into that meeting, Ted immediately looked me in the eye and said, Eric, what's it going to take to get WCW competitive with WWE? I used to box. I learned in boxing that when you're getting your ass kicked, tuck your chin and put your hands up, you know, defend yourself. And my way of doing that was just to basically stutter and say, what would we do? We would, I don't know, get prime time. Because we were Saturday nights, 6 o'clock. Next thing I know, that was the mandate. Ted looked at Scott Sassa and said, Scott, give Eric 2 hours or 3 hours, whatever it was, every Monday night. Shit, now what do I do? Damn.
So Bruce, what are you thinking when you hear about this?
Well, to that point, I mean, you do have Ted Turner there, who owns the network, owns several networks, and he wants to be competitive with his WCW against WWF. He could have picked any night of the week and won it. He went head-to-head with our primetime programming on Monday night, where we were established, where we had been established for many years on the USA Network. So, from our standpoint, it was a declaration of war. It wasn't, well, I want to be competitive, I want to be on prime time with my wrestling program. Let's go on Thursday night, let's go on Tuesday night, Wednesday, any other night of the week he had, because he owned the network and he could put anything on that he wanted to put on at any given time. Instead, he chose head to head. So yeah, it was a declaration of war. We didn't look at it too kindly, other than they were attempting to take an audience that we had built.
What was your job with the WWE at the time? What was your official title?
Wow, I had so many of them. It's I really don't remember. I worked in talent relations, but at the time, the only people that were writing and doing television at that time was basically myself, Pat Patterson, and Vince McMahon. And later on, as other things developed, I moved more into the talent relations end of things, and Vince Russo came in on the creative end of things. But at that point in time, I was writing the television, booking the live events, doing soup to nuts, the whole 9 yards.
So you're right up there in the food chain.
Yes.
So Eric, you know that you have your start date of, I believe it's September 11th, 1995. Did you guys know that this was the start date? Was it promoted for a couple months before, where it was like, coming soon, Nitro, or was it just 1 week Nitro was on?
You know, honestly, I don't recall. I know that we picked. Go ahead, Bruce.
It was promoted heavily, and it was a very strategic date to start, because we were preempted for the Westminster Dog Show for 2 weeks. Okay? So they promoted it on everything that they promoted it everywhere they could, including the USA Network, September 11th, and they had 2 weeks, their first 2 weeks, completely unopposed. So, yes, they promoted it heavily.
So you knew it was coming in, but it was during the, I think that was mine, but you can have it.
Oh.
Sorry.
I asked him for a water. I said, oh my God, can't you just bring me a cup?
This is vodka on ice.
Oh, it sure is.
You are correct, sir. I have a vodka with a splash of air. Yeah.
Yes. So you know it's coming, and it's during the Westminster Dog Show, which for WCW's case, that's a pretty smart move to do that. So Eric, what is your mindset? Okay, now you said that Ted Turner came up with the idea, but now it's in your hands because you're the boss.
Yeah.
You're the hot young upstart at the time.
Yeah, well, it wasn't really a hot young upstart there. I don't want to go back too far, but WCW, and this was prior to you coming there. WCW was, kicked around and had been through quite a bit, and we were just beginning to start to make some progress. I think Turner started to see, when I say Turner, I mean corporately, and especially Ted, started to see that we were beginning to make some correct moves. There was light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. Now I get Nitro dumped on my lap, and I knew that I'm either going to make this work, or it's going to be a catastrophe. It'll be a failure. And I was afraid if WCW didn't live up to Ted's expectations, there was a good chance it was going to go away. So there was a lot of pressure, but I knew I had to do something different. I couldn't be as good at what the WWF was doing at the time as they were. They'd been around for 3 generations, for crying out loud. They were established. They had a great fan base. They had a loyal fan base. So there was no way I was going to out WWF the WWF. Had to be different. And I knew that right from the very beginning, that if it wasn't different, there was no way I could be better than the WWF. I either had to be different than them, or I was automatically going to be worse than them. So I was forced to be different. There was no choice.
Right. So you go to Minneapolis for the first Nitro, which is strange because, not strange, but WCW was a kind of a southern thing. And what was the mindset to go to the Mall of America, of all places, to do the first Nitro? And what did you want to do with this first show?
That's a good question. In accordance with being different, I made a list of every possible way we could be different than the WWF. And unfortunately, WCW, prior to Nitro, we couldn't draw flies if we rolled our product in horse shit. We just couldn't draw. You'd be put on a show, you'd be lucky if 200 or 300 people showed up for free. So we knew we needed to have an audience. It had to be a great, different looking backdrop with a good crowd. And it was a risk, but we thought, if we do a show for the Mall of America, I knew visually it was going to look great because it's like 3 or 4 stories up and the ring was going to be in the center, and at least it would look different than your typical arena show with dim lighting and 300 people, and 200 of them are carrying brown paper bags.
Or straight vodka. But the big night was, to delve into this, and this is where the debate starts. Can we get a chair up here so we can put the drinks on it? You want to just bring a chair? Bring this one right there. No one's using it. See, you guys are involved. We told you. You guys are going to be roadies for this show as well. Thank you. So the first thing being was the fact that it's the first Nitro, and Bruce, I'm sure you guys are watching intently, and what happens but out walks Lex Luger. That was the first shot across the shot across the bow. How did you get Luger? How did you keep it a secret? Did you know he was going to be there? Let's talk about the first real kind of Monday Night Wars acquisition.
How did we get Luger? He had been in WCW for a long time, went to the WWF, wasn't happy there, or wasn't working out for him. I don't even remember what the reason was why he wanted to come back, but he did. And Sting actually came to me and tried to convince me to bring him back. And the truth is, I've said this before, I didn't really appreciate Lex Luger much. I didn't like him. That's best. I don't want to say things too negative, but I really didn't like him. I didn't think he had much value as a character because he'd been around before, and I was really reluctant to bring him in. But Sting kept working me over. And so finally I brought him in. I offered him like 20% of what he was making when he left WCW. I gave him a short-term contract, very short-term, and I was actually hoping he would turn it down because I really didn't want him there. But I also wanted to support Sting and take a chance. So we did. As far as keeping it secret, I was surprised, really. The only three people that knew about it was Sting and myself and Lex, and maybe Lex told his wife or his lawyer, but that was about it.
Well, personally, I was in Hong Kong, so I didn't get to watch it live. And we were shooting on, back in the States, they were shooting the Open for Monday Night Raw, which they put a ring on top of Titan Towers and had helicopters shooting it and all these different things going on. So while Nitro is actually taking place, everybody at WWF, they're working, they're up on the roof, they're shooting this brand new Open. Prior to that, we had a list of talent who was going to be in town for the Open. One name that kept not appearing was Lex Luger. And the reason being was Lex's contract was coming up. And there were two different things, is one had it expiring at one time and one had it expiring at another time. But it was something going on with J.J. Dillon, and there was a big controversy about Lex. But Lex continually, which Vince McMahon is often guilty of, took him at his word. No, boss, I'm not going anywhere. I'm here for life. And that was good enough for Vince. And so we had Lex on there. Of course, Lex doesn't show up for the shoot. And next thing you know, he's showing up on Nitro, and I'm getting a phone call in Hong Kong from Pat Patterson. You would not believe who've showed up. And I had the Lex Luger on the show. Oh my God. Good for them. Now they have him tagged. So it was shocking, but it was, in many ways, it was a relief, as Eric said. It's like, hey, man, congratulations, hell of a move.
See, this was the thing about the Monday Night Wars, that as a talent, you could take a stagnant career or a career, because Lex didn't, he got a big push in WWF, didn't really do much. But by suddenly jumping to Nitro, he's the talk of the town.
That was the original Deflate Gate.
But that was the beauty of the Monday Night Wars, because there was a competition, but this was the first example of suddenly Lex is on, everyone's talking. Luger showed up, Luger showed up, Luger showed up. And it wasn't too long after that that Medusa dropped the women's title into the garbage can. Let's talk about that. Because that was pretty close too. And this is another defection from the WWF, and she comes with the title. Tell us about this.
Well, I'll get to Medusa in a second, but
Sure.
with Lex, I think what set the tone for the Monday Night Wars, and it was part of the strategy, and I will take credit for it, was to be controversial and to do things to get people talking. And Bruce talked earlier about, why do they go head to head? They could go on any night of the week, and that's true. But if you were going to open up a restaurant, if you're going to open up a fast food restaurant, and you knew there was a Taco Bell on that corner and a Burger King on that corner, where would you put your restaurant? You'd put it where people go to buy food. That's why we went to Monday Night. But in going to Monday Night, we knew we had to be different. We had to be controversial. We had to take advantage of the fact that people talk, especially the wrestling audience is a very loyal, very passionate audience. Lex Luger was the first step in creating that controversy, in creating the buzz, doing things differently. Medusa was a second move. There may have been more, like giving away finishes and things like that. But
Little guy beats big guy with the sidekick at the green belt, yeah.
But
Little things
Medusa,
like that.
Medusa had been at WCW. I had known Medusa's going back to AWA days. We both started for Verne Gagne right about the same time, Kurt Hennig and all that. And she called me up and said, hey, don't have a contract, any chance I can come back? Sure. She said, what do I do with the belt? Bring it with you. We'll figure it out. I knew what we were going to do with it.
Now, why did she not have a contract? Was that one of your responsibilities?
No, that was, unfortunately, no, it wasn't. It was one of those JJ deals. But again, it's Vince McMahon at the time. The contracts consisted of, it was a very simple contract, no money guaranteed other than $25 when you wrestled at TV. And Vince was a handshake kind of guy. That was it. That was it. There was no money guaranteed at all. And he was a handshake kind of guy. And if a talent told him, I'm here, I'm good, then that was good enough for him. And when Medusa's contract came up, it was like, are you here? yes, I'm hereby. Okay, great, it's just a matter of paperwork. And obviously those things shored up quite a bit after.
What did you
after
think,
that.
or what was Vince's reaction, or the company's reaction when she dumped the title in the garbage can?
Pissed. Yeah, pretty pissed. You know, because it was that one even more so than Luger, because she was a champion, and she takes her intellectual property, the belt itself, and drops it in a trash can on their TV show. So that one stung a little bit. You know, I don't know necessarily that Medusa was as big of a star, perception-wise, as Lex was. However, having that title and dropping it in the trash, the symbolism of that stung. That was an ouch.
It was an FU to the WWE, WWF. I mean, it was a real middle finger right up your ass.
Oh yeah.
And I know you, especially at the time. I mean, we've all changed in the last 15, 20 years, but at the time, you probably got off on that and loved that.
I ain't gonna lie.
The finger or the belt.
But I gotta be honest with you. To me, yes, I enjoyed the hell out of it. I really did. Just like I enjoyed the hell out of giving away finishes. But it wasn't personal, despite the legacy that I have created for myself, I guess, or others have created for me. It really wasn't personal. What I was excited about was the fact that it was going to just turn the business upside down. I was determined to do shit differently, to make people go, holy crap, what are they gonna do next? And that was a big move.
Well, you keep mentioning it a couple times, and this doesn't have to be a history lesson. We can go where we want to go. You keep mentioning giving away finishes. You both did. The reason why you could do that, how could you give away finishes? Explain the whole concept of how you could do this.
It was very simple, and it goes back to, you know, when I left Ted Turner's office and I knew that I had to come up with a show that would work, and I made my list of things and ways to be different. I went, okay, what's the first thing I can do? Well, they're taped. Most of the time, I'm live. Bingo. We'll find out the information on the shows that were taped, and we'll tell everybody what happened, because that'll really stir some shit. And that's why.
And this was before the internet, before you
Yep.
could find this out. So nobody knew what was going on. What were you thinking when now he's giving away finishes?
That was kind of one of those taboo, you just don't do that, okay? And so the gloves were off, you know, I was like, okay, they want to play, then let's play. But we were at a big disadvantage because we had our television booked out for an entire year to go live on Monday and then tape the following Tuesday for the next Monday. So financially, we couldn't, at the time, go live every single week. So they had that advantage of being live, knowing what we taped, and being able to tell everybody at the very beginning. We combated it a little bit by doing live voiceovers, where we recorded everything, but the voiceovers themselves were actually done live that day in the studio. I don't know how much that really helped, other than we could be current, people could scratch their head and say, hey, maybe they are live. But that was an unfortunate part of the time.
What were some of the finishes that he gave away, like some of the words that were used? You mentioned one about the little guy beats the big guy, or what was this all about?
Oh, that's the one that always stuck in everybody's craw. Just it was Shawn Michaels and Sid, and I believe, yeah, you guys don't want to watch that other show on another network. Go ahead and tell you what's going to happen. The little guy beats the big guy with a kick that a green belt in my local karate class does better, something like that. There were
It was exactly what I said.
Yeah.
And by the way, there were a few of them, okay? I was a black belt, I used to compete professionally, and as an amateur, that was a shitty kick, by any standard. And I like Shawn, you know, we're friends now, but it was a shitty kick.
It probably was, but it was those type of things. It was those type of things that, you know, were just no one had ever done before. You know, there wasn't an avenue to do it before, but no one had ever done that before. And you guys were on an hour earlier than us too, weren't you, at that time? Or did that start
Yeah, I
later?
don't remember, because
Yeah.
we moved around.
Yeah, I think that they started an entire hour before us, so they had the jump. So we're on from 9 to 11. They were on from 8 to 10. So they had an entire hour to get an audience, hook an audience, and potentially keep an audience.
Bruce, I'm not sure. I will have to go back and look, because like Chris said, I don't have my dates. It's 20 years ago, for crying out loud. I don't remember what I did yesterday. But I think initially we started out at the same time as you, but we started at 7:55. We went up because we had that.
Yeah, that goes back to that billionaire guy that owned his own networks and could start whenever he wanted.
No, it goes back to this guy because I wanted to win.
Yeah, you couldn't have done that. You couldn't have done that on any other network.
Maybe. Well, and that was the kind of the company line was that billionaire Ted, the evil billionaire, is coming in to take advantage of the poor family business, the fighting, struggling, ne'er-do-well family business. But the evil billionaire is trying to take us out, and that's what the WWE's kind of company line was. But you're saying that it was Bischoff was doing this.
Well, Bischoff was the one that was making the decisions. Bischoff was the one that was, creating the tone and was responsible for the Lex Luger and the Medusa and giving away finishes. That was all me. That had nothing to do with Ted. Ted was the guy that said, go make it competitive, go make it successful.
And even before, obviously the biggest jump, and we'll talk about that, was Razor and Diesel. But another jump at the time, I just watched the Randy Savage DVD, was when Vince was having Randy do commentating, and then he didn't renew his contract and went to WCW. Did you guys not know that Savage was going to work for WCW? Was it a surprise, the same way that Luger kind of was?
Well, no, and Randy went before the wars. Randy was already on there before the wars, but with Randy had been doing commentary, and Randy was under contract, and Randy called us on a very early in the morning, drunk. Bless his heart, love him, and I'm glad he's in the Hall of Fame, and dear friend of mine, and quit. And Vince, being Vince, said, if you're unhappy, I'll release you from your contract. Go. And he went, and he had actually already struck a deal with him. But it was one of those deals that was a shock. It was definitely a shock to me, because we were going by to pick him up to go to Poughkeepsie for TV. And Vince gets in the car and says, guys, Randy Savage is now the proud property of WCW. So
Was that your decision? Were you in charge at the time when Randy came?
Yeah, definitely. Hulk had called me, actually, and told me about Randy, and that Randy was available. Randy was talking to Hulk, and Hulk came to me. Hulk wanted to work with him, and Hulk saw that there was going to be something there, so he put me in touch with Randy. I talked to Randy. We worked out a deal pretty easily and quickly, and we brought him in.
So how were the ratings for Raw, for Nitro, when you started? The first year, let's say, or first 6 months or so. Was it competitive? Was it low? Were you feeling any type of competition whatsoever? Were you laughing at them?
Well, at first, we beat them at first. Obviously, we won the rate if you were comparing ratings. However, there was still always that concern of diluting the audience, because now the audience has to split and decide whether they're going to watch Nitro or whether they're going to watch Raw. So in the very beginning, it was the arrogant, cocky, we're kicking their ass in the ratings, so don't need to really worry about them right now. But at the same time, slowly but surely, you're watching that audience dwindle a little bit, and some that would go over and sample Nitro, some didn't come back. So we started seeing trends and different things, but at first, we were the big dogs.
And what are you doing to try and up the ante every week? You try to do something different all the time and try and, you mentioned about how you wanted it to be unconventional. So you get, we talked about Luger, we talked about Medusa, et cetera, et cetera. What were you doing besides that after Medusa came in, those guys?
I think, the general tone and the mission, and it went back to, once Ted said, go do this, we had some work to do. And one of the things that we did was some pretty significant research with a research company outside of Turner Broadcasting that sat down with wrestling fans, just like we have in this room. And they'd sit down with 25 of them at a time, and they would put WWF up on the screen, and they would ask the fans to watch WWF, and then with a little meter, kind of turn it to the right when they saw what they liked, turn it to the left when they saw something they didn't. and all that information was kind of put up on a screen. You could watch in real time what the audience was responding to on WWF programming. You could also watch how they would respond to our programming. So that gave us an indication of the elements of a show that the audiences reacted to, positive and negatively. The other thing that we did in that research was ask fans, what is it you like about wrestling? Why do you watch it? And by the way, these wrestling fans, some of them were, hardcore, if you will, or people that just watched it, religiously every week. Some of them were occasional fans. Some of those groups were people that used to watch wrestling and didn't anymore. So we had a good cross-section of feedback from the audience. One of the things I'll never forget, and I believe in it so much to this day, that we learned, I kind of knew it, but to have so many people articulate it to us, was that they love to see things that they didn't expect to see happen. They love to be surprised. That was like the most consistent feedback that we got in that research. So just about everything that I did, I tried to think about, how can I present this in a way that feels like spontaneous combustion? How can it feel like it wasn't supposed to happen? That was really the premise of that show.
Did you guys see, obviously WCW is a competition. Did you have any feelings about Eric? Like knowing this brash guy coming in, an announcer from AWA.
Good looking son of a bitch too.
Looked like John Davidson. That's old school. But what did you think about him personally? Because I'm sure you had an image of him in your head.
We had an image of him. Eric had come in 88, 89 for an announcer position. So he had come through, but we probably said hello, and that was about it, and did the audition. So I didn't know Eric. Vince didn't know Eric. So
But you know how the business goes, though. You probably think, look at this guy.
Exactly. We had, horrible visions of Eric, because you have the screen persona to judge by, and you have the innuendo, and you have people, the gossip people, and when it's the other side or someone from your side talking about the other side, they're rarely going to say anything good about the person. So Eric was this evil, conniving, lying, low-life son of a bitch that was stealing our talent and trying to put us out of business and trying to take our livelihoods away from us. So, that was the perception without, didn't know him, didn't want to know him.
Did you have any names for him during booking meetings? Like, the jackass is at it again or something? Was there a name? A pet name?
No, not really. Fuck. Bischoff. That was
And with Vince changed either, I can assure you.
With Vince, that's a word too. Ugh.
Oh, God.
And then what's your perceptions of the evil Vince McMahon, kind of the old school family promoter?
Like Bruce said, the only impressions I had of him are the ones that I got from people that worked for him. Certainly Hulk told me a lot of things about Vince McMahon. So did everybody else that worked for him. And like Bruce said, when someone would leave WWF and come to work for me, how do you think they talked about Vince McMahon? They didn't talk about the great things that he is and that he's done and continues to do, quite frankly. They didn't talk about that. They told me basically, they tell you what they think you want to hear. So that was my impression of him, other than he was hugely successful and I wanted to be more successful than him. That was it, though. I didn't really have a personal impression of him.
Okay, let's talk about the real, the balance shifting, which was, of course, the NWO, the beginnings of that. Hall and Nash jumping to Nitro and to WCW. Talk about the events that occurred to make that happen. I don't know if it's more on your end, Bruce. Why don't you talk about the final days of the clique in the WWE? And first of all, talk about how much pull they had on the company, because they were running the company in a lot of ways, from what I heard from an outsider's perspective.
Especially in the locker room, more so than in the company. But in the locker room, the clique definitely wielded a lot of power, influence. They were bullies and made life difficult if you weren't in favor with them. And part of that's with any locker room, pretty much. You're going to have your leaders, you're going to have your followers. And at the time, there were rumblings about, Razor wanting to leave and go to WCW, and he had been made this offer and so on and so forth. And then there were rumblings about Diesel and he's going to leave. And Shawn was locked up. Shawn couldn't go anywhere if he wanted to. And I remember...
Well, why would they want to leave? What was the problem?
Well, because they got paid on what they drew, okay? And so we didn't have guaranteed contracts. If you went in and you only drew 1,000 people, you got paid on drawing 1,000 people. And, I remember the guys coming up saying, I'm the lowest paid WWF champion in history. Guess what? You're the lowest drawing WWF champion in WWF.
That's Nash. You can say
It goes.
It's true. It goes hand. I'm not saying anything that's not documented.
It is. It goes hand in hand. So if they're not paying to come see you, you're not going to reap the rewards on the other side. So there was a lot of that bitching and moaning going on. So to be able to go elsewhere where they had a guaranteed paycheck coming in every week, they knew what they were going to make and they were going to get that money whether they worked or not, versus go out, draw a house, go out and bust your ass, make people come in, make them come back, and earn your money. It was just a difference in philosophy.
Okay, so they're mad about that, Eric.
I'm going to take a little bit of an exception to that one, because what I was told, and I'm not going to name names if I can avoid it, but a lot of, when those guys came to me, when people would come to me, yes, it was about the guaranteed contract. I'm not going to kid anybody or myself. Yes, that was part of it. But the reason they didn't like the system is because it was discretionary. The formulas that were used and the percentages and the payouts were a little kabuki-ish at times. At least that's what I was told. And that nobody ever really knew what the formula was, and the discretion sometimes was a little unfavorable to certain individuals. So yeah, when they came to me, yes, they got guaranteed money, but wasn't that, for the most part, wasn't the real reason they came, or the only reason they came. A lot of the reasons they came to WCW was because they weren't on the road 300 days a year. They could make the same amount of money, maybe in some cases more, maybe in some cases not necessarily, but they were on the road 180 days a year as opposed to being on the road 300 days a year, and that had a lot to do with it. At least that's what they told me at the time.
And I'm not going to argue that point either, because the WWF, like I said, they had to work for their money and they had to go make the towns. You guys weren't running as many house shows as we were. That was our business. We had to be on the road. We were a touring company. We had to be out there selling merchandise, selling out arenas, and being able to get out to the people, per se. But a lot of them, yeah, it was schedule, but it was money. But the same formula that Eric talks about being kabuki-ish, once the houses started filling up, nobody was bitching about that formula when their checks started getting bigger because they were putting more asses in seats.
That's so true. They did bitch about it. They bitched about it to me.
Not after we were kicking y'all's ass, and they stayed with us. And Chris Jericho's coming over, and everybody else. But no, it's the same formula, and it's different. There's a big difference when everybody's making money than when business is down and not everybody's making money.
Did they come to you, Hall and Nash? Did they call you?
Actually, Hall and Nash both came to me through Diamond Dallas Page. I had known both Scott. I had known Scott going back to AWA peripherally. I worked with Kevin in WCW when I was an announcer there. I wasn't involved with creative or didn't have any control of the company. I had nothing to do with that stuff. No matter what anybody says, it was not on me. But they were they were tight with DDP, so they came to me through him.
And you cut the deal. Were they still under contract to WWE, or our contract is up in June? We want to talk to you about July 1st, type of thing.
Yeah, I think it was that.
Gotcha.
I don't remember specifically, but I think that was it.
Did you know that they were leaving specifically? This wasn't a surprise like Luger?
No, we knew they were leaving. Yeah, we definitely knew they were leaving because we had gone to them with contracts. And frankly, the only one that Vince was really interested in keeping was Razor at the time. You know, I think he would have fought If he thought he had a chance to keep Razor, I think he would have fought to keep Razor. At that time, I think Nash had just, it pushed so hard and done so many things behind the scenes that it was like, good riddance, go, I'm done, you know.
We're talking about something here, and this is something that I want to point out to everybody, that at the time, there was no such thing as a guaranteed contract in the WWE. Like Bruce said, you would sign for an opportunity. You'd get a chance, this is your opportunity. Whereas WCW, you could go and make this amount of money for sure, and it was a lot of money. 100 grand, 200 grand, 300 grand, $1 million, whatever it could be. So this started basically with WCW. And this is something, because I remember you saying, it's not my money, it's Ted Turner's money. We can do this. So you had the advantage in that case.
We did, there's no doubt about it, but it was an advantage that we had to take advantage of because, quite frankly, WWE, even to this day, has a phenomenal licensing and merchandising machine, and they had all the ancillary income that they could share with the talent in a pool. We didn't have, the WCW didn't have that. We didn't have any licensing. We didn't, our pay-per-views sucked. We weren't drawing. There wasn't enough money there to share with anybody. So we didn't have the ability. I would have loved to have had that kind of structure, quite frankly, but we didn't. If Chris Jericho or Kevin Nash or Scott Hall or anybody else would have come in, and I would have said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you 20% of all of our licensing and merchandising. 10 times more than Vince pays you. Great. What is it? 20% of what? It would have been 20% of nothing. So we had to give them guaranteed contracts. Otherwise, they wouldn't have made any money.
Classic promoter. When you found out they're leaving, you know for sure that you're leaving. I mean, you're probably thinking, well, whatever. We own Diesel. We own Razor Ramon. What's he gonna do? And then,
Yeah, there was that thought.
tell us, what was that? You got it?
Well, no, without a doubt, you know, we figured they had to come up with completely different characters, completely different names, and WWF was a very big character-driven company at the time. I mean, it was all characters, and so we figured whatever they do, they can't be Razor and they can't be Diesel. So when Scott Hall shows up on WCW and says, "Hey yo," and does the toothpick, it's like, whoa. That's Razor Ramon, that's not Scott Hall. Because Scott Hall didn't say, "Hey, yo," and walk around with a toothpick until he came to the WWF, and the Razor Ramon character was created for him. So that's where it became, they were using the characters that were created at the WWF with different names.
Kind of.
Hey, yo.
Kind of. And look, this was litigated in federal court, okay? So I'm not gonna sit here and try to defend something that some judge has already made a decision on. Nor do I wanna embarrass myself by trying to convince you guys otherwise. However, yes, we did use the "hey yo." There's no question about that. But that really wasn't, going into it, that wasn't the intent. I don't ever recall sitting there going, okay, here's what we're gonna do. I know you're not gonna wear the same goofy shit that they had you wearing. And we're not gonna call you Razor Ramon. We're not gonna make you a cartoon character, but I do kind of wanna hang on to that dialect because it's pretty cool. We didn't do that, okay? It did happen. The intent, I'm gonna go back to the intent. Nitro had to be different. We didn't want to be, and Bruce was very kind, and partly because he was involved in it. Yes, it was a very character-driven show. In my opinion, it was a very cartoony show. The characters were very animated, and it worked, by the way. It was working phenomenally. But the show was targeted towards children. It was a younger audience. It was targeted towards the licensing and the merchandising business, which was smart, okay? And we had to do it differently. So one of the things that we did with Nitro is, let's just let the guys use your real names. We don't have to call them the garbage truck driver. He can just be Scott Hall. You know, he could just be Kevin Nash, but he did hang on to some elements of that character that came along with him. And yeah, judge made the decision. We were guilty of that.
You got a question over here? Sure.
Yeah, you said that you weren't in charge during the invention of Oz, you said WCW had more like real characters. How do you explain Glacier?
He wants to know about Glacier.
Smart ass. No, I'm going to answer that. Actually, it's a good question. Look, WCW, I decided that Nitro had to have more reality-based characters. Glacier came along, I believe, at a time prior to Nitro, where we were trying to emulate. And we looked at WWF at the time and said, okay, let's try to be them, only better.
Glacier was during Nitro.
Was he doing?
Oh yeah.
Really?
Glacier's coming.
I thought he was before that. Thanks for correcting me.
That was about 97 because I was there. Blood runs cold.
Oh, damn. Guilty. Not all of our characters were reality-based characters.
Let me throw in a little thing because like I said, you said if you want to call bullshit, call bullshit. Mortal Kombat was very popular at the time, the video game. And I believe that this was going to be an offshoot of Mortal Kombat with a whole group of characters, starting with Glacier and moving to, I believe Mortis was one and a couple other cats. That's maybe what the idea was.
That was the idea, but the timing was, I got the timing wrong. But that was the idea. It was a moral, I mean, just look at it. You know, it was kind of our rip-off, if you will, of the whole Mortal Kombat phenomenon.
Right. It didn't really work, but we'll go back to what did work, your greatest creation, and I just want to talk about the NWO because we were mentioning how Razor comes in and you're like, you can't use this character, but you are. Where did you get the idea for NWO? Because this is yours. This is nobody else's idea but yours.
Yeah, and I'm glad you asked that because a lot of times I'll do interviews and people will take certain bits and pieces of that interview and it'll become a dialogue and it changes everything. Here's the idea for the NWO came to me over a period of time. It wasn't like a light bulb going off in my head. But I had been over to Japan quite a bit and had just been amazed at the way business was conducted in Japan. And we talked about this last night with Jim Ross a little bit. You know, in Japan at the time, going back into the early 90s, the press, the media, people looked at professional wrestling the same way they looked at soccer, or sumo. They treated it like real sports. You go to a big event, and it was on the front page of the sports page the following day. And I was trying to figure out a way to create that kind of reality or perception within our product. And I was just learning about the psychology, if you will, that took place in Japan at that time. And there was a lot of that invasion kind of storylines.
Company versus company.
Yeah, it was company versus company. So that's where it came from, really. I wanted to create that.
Can I interrupt for a second? So you were trying to create they being them, the WWF, by taking characters that have been established there and saying they, because you never said WWF, and I know that, but it was like, well, who are they fighting for? Who are they? And the perception from our vantage point was like WWF against WCW when Razor and Diesel came in.
But and I'm not going to lie to you, that it wasn't like that thought didn't occur to me, but it really wasn't the whole idea. Look, Scott Hall had been to WCW before we went to WWF. Same with Kevin Nash. The premise, in my mind, the largest part of that premise, was that these were guys that had been in WCW, were treated like shit, didn't make any money, were disrespected, went to the WWF, became big stars, and now they were coming back to get revenge. We're going to show you what happens when you treat us like shit. We're taking over. That was the premise. And yes, we were aware of the fact that certain people would think, oh, they would be curious as to see if there was going to be a war between WWF and WCW. Of course, we were aware of that, but that wasn't the driving force behind that idea.
Yeah, I just think that from a fan's point of view, I think that was a perception that the takeaway.
Was the office mad? Was the company mad about this?
Well, they were definitely upset because when WCW did portray it was they. Who do they represent? What are they doing here? Who else is going to come? And it was very well done on their part. I mean, very cleverly done because they never came out and said WWF until
Judge saw through it.
well, yeah. And then, but it was until you were made to say, you don't work for the WWF, do you? You know, and we're forced to.
Was your original thought to have 3 guys? Or 10 guys, or 2 guys, or 1 guy?
No, it was 3. I knew right off the bat we were going to have 3.
Did you know you wanted to be Hall, Nash, and Hogan?
Well, yes, but it started out with Scott Hall. We knew Kevin Nash was coming down the pipe. I wasn't sure who the 3rd guy was going to be, but we knew there was going to be a 3rd guy.
What was it that? Because let's be honest. I mean, that worked. I remember the first meeting I ever had with you in CNN Center was when they had first signed. And I remember asking you, like, Mark, super big-eyed, like, oh my gosh, I'm here. I was like, what are you going to call Razor Ramon and Diesel? You're like, if I told you, I'd have to kill you. And the thing was, it was Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, and they come in, and the first thing they do is they powerbomb you basically through the stage. No announcer had ever been really touched at that point. Vince hadn't started it. This was a revolutionary thing. Now, had you trained as a wrestler? Did you care, or just powerbomb me through it?
Yeah, that was actually the second week. The first thing we did, and this again was this is how we started. It was a little bit like Sugar. When Scott Hall came in, we didn't introduce him and he didn't come down the ramp and we didn't do what everybody else had always done. We literally had him walk down through the seats in the middle of a match, and the way it was laid out, the guys in the ring were supposed to just stop and go, what the hell? So it looked real, it looked unscripted, it looked unplanned, going back to the research I talked about. That was the plan, and it was executed decently. With Kevin, we wanted that to also have a significant impact. We wanted to come up with a way that made it feel like, holy shit, that wasn't supposed to happen. I've never seen that before. Again, going back to being different than. And to answer your question, no, I'd never trained as a wrestler. I wrestled in high school and in college. And I was in relatively decent shape at the time, so I wasn't afraid of doing it. Probably should have been, quite frankly. Actually, I really should have been now, looking back at it. But I wasn't at the time. He took me backstage about an hour before the show and said, okay, this is how it works, and here's what I'm going to do. And I did it. I didn't rehearse it. I didn't plan it. I didn't go through it a bunch of times. I just went out and did it.
Now, once again, at the time, this is another huge buzz in the business. Luger and Medusa and this. Were you guys feeling that it's starting to slip through our fingers, or was it the classic Vince arrogance of whatever, who cares?
On the outside, it was a classic Vince arrogance. God, creativity will beat them every time. They're just copying us. But there was a feeling of, well, a lot of guys going that way, and people are starting to look at, well, what am I really worth? And so now they're starting to bend the ear at WCW and say, hey, got anything for me? And we weren't the big dogs, the only game in town anymore. And everybody was saying, well, you know what? If I don't work here, I could go there. And we didn't want anybody to go there, especially there. So I think there was a feeling, honestly, man, I think there was a feeling of we have to change. We have to look at the way we do business and reevaluate. So there was a little, I hate to say the word fear because it wasn't fearful, it was just, what are we going to do?
So tell us how Hogan became involved with the NWO. That was the missing piece that took it over the top.
You know, I had gone to see Hulk. I know you guys have probably heard this and read this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that history too much, but to keep it in context, I had gone to Hulk about a year or so before and tried to convince him to change his character. Still got a kayfabe, it's just my nature, but and he politely showed me to the door. You know, he was very nice about it, but he basically, you know, he stroked his Fu Manchu and every time he stroked his Fu Manchu, I know I was going to get shown the door one way or the other. He started stroking his Fu Manchu and said, brother, you'll never understand it. Until you walk a mile in my red and yellow boots, you'll never really understand it. Okay. And then he went off to go do a movie. And in the meantime, Scott Hall happened, Kevin Nash happened. I was watching the audience react to it, and so was Hulk. He was off in California doing a movie called Santa with Muscles, actually. I'll never forget. And I hadn't talked to Hulk in a month or 2 or 3. He was only doing 4 pay-per-views a year with us, and he would only do the TVs associated with those 4 pay-per-views. So I didn't really see him a lot. And I got a call from him, saying, "Hey, brother, what are you doing? Come on out to LA. I want to talk to you about what's going on." And I came to his trailer, drove out on location. We had a 6-pack or a case of beer and a couple of Cuban cigars. And he asked me, who's the third guy? And I wouldn't tell him. I said, "I don't know yet," because I didn't know for sure. And he goes, "Well, I know who it should be." I said, "Who's that?" In my mind, I'm thinking, "Oh, please tell me you want to do this." And he volunteered because he saw the momentum, he saw the opportunity.
If it wasn't Hulk, did you have another guy in mind?
Yeah, it was going to be Sting.
Sting. Got a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back. Early '96, there were the Billionaire Pet skits, and it seemed like they started off somewhat lighthearted. It became a lot more personal with some of the controversial quotes from Turner and the legal action. You could sort of share your perspectives from respective companies on those skits and why they became so intense as they went on.
Well, and it's funny, people don't believe you when you talk about how ideas like that actually come to fruition. The guy that did the Billionaire Ted skits, the guy that portrayed Ted Turner, David Sahadi, who was one of our producers, had met him at a party. It says, "This guy does the best Ted Turner you've ever seen." And he brings him in and introduces him to Vince. And Vince goes, "God damn, we could do something with that." And that's how Billionaire Ted, the initial seed happened. And they did start off like, okay, hey, here's Billionaire Ted. I know what I do. I'll buy me a wrestling company. I'll put it on whenever I want to, and they were still mean-spirited, no matter how you looked at it, man. The Nacho Man, the Huckster, Scheme Gene, and his 900 line. But it was fair. It was cruel, but fair. Okay, they were leaving themselves out there for it. But that's how it started. And then as things progressed, it was, well, fuck you. Oh, yeah, well, fuck you back. and it did. It did get a little more mean-spirited and a little more inside than it ever should have.
Bruce, you know that I've been friends with Sahadi now for a couple of years, right?
Yeah.
Excuse me 1 second, I have to make a phone call. Sahadi, yeah, Bischoff here. I had no idea you came up with that idea, you little brick. I'm deleting you. Honestly, this is the first time I did.
Yeah, but it wasn't even an idea. It was just that Sahadi met this guy, and was so entertained by him, and he did other characters too. But he showed Vince the Ted Turner character, and Vince was like, "God damn, we gotta do something."
You know what? You know what's funny? I don't mean to cut you off, but we did an autograph session
It's a
yesterday.
debate. You can cut him off.
All right, thank you. We did an autograph session yesterday, where we did the Monday Night Wars was playing in the background. I couldn't see it, but I could hear it, and I've seen it, before. And
We're talking about the Monday Night Wars show on the network?
No, the DVD.
The DVD, gotcha.
The original one that came out. And I can't remember now who it was talking. Oh, it was Mick Foley. Was talking about how pissed off, or no, he didn't say pissed off. His exact words were, I think, when Ted saw that, it lit a fire underneath him, implying that Ted was upset about it. Not true. I don't know how Mick would have ever known that Ted was upset, because I don't think Mick really hung out with Ted much. But that was the impression that was given on that DVD, is that Ted Turner was really pissed off about the Billionaire Ted skits. I can tell you that Ted Turner thought they were funny. He got a kick out of them. He did not take it personally. It started making me nervous, and I wasn't exactly sure why, because I didn't know what was going to happen in the future, but it was kind of a ballsy move, and up until that point, I hadn't seen a lot of ballsy moves. It was more like, let's pretend they don't exist. Here's how we're gonna deal with that problem. We're gonna pretend it doesn't exist. We're not going to acknowledge them and give them credit for what they're doing. all of a sudden now they're reacting. And that's when, to me, that's when it started feeling serious.
And that's a real good point too, because in the past, that was a philosophy. They don't exist. And when this happened, it was like, let's go.
Well, you mentioned that Ted didn't care. What about Hulk and Macho and Gene and those guys?
You know, I can't speak for Mach, obviously, and Gene and I have never really talked about it. I'm guessing, knowing Mach the way I did, hated it. Motherfucker. I can't imagine that Mach would have reacted any differently than that. Gene, I'm not sure. Hulk, I think, you know, he didn't sell it much. I don't think he was happy about it, but, you know, he's sensitive about getting older and being bald anyway. Who isn't? Who wouldn't be? But he didn't overreact to it.
But those were so bad and ran so long, too long, that if you like were to watch them in succession, you'll notice that we had to use different Hulksters. We had to use different savages. And the worst was the match that, oh God, I put that up there with Katie Vick of having to produce that thing. It was one of the worst things ever.
You actually had a match?
Oh yeah, and it was a Vince production, and yeah, and it was, but it just went on so long, and nobody cared. It just
Well,
was,
no, one guy cared,
yeah,
which is why it went on so long.
yeah.
God damn, this is great. Good shit. Good shit.
This is great.
How about this cat way back there, man?
Question for Eric, since we're in town, was the plan to always bury Mike Awesome, or if he would have actually showed up with the ECW title and you would have done a little bit more with him as opposed to being a fat chick killer?
Talking about Mike Awesome is the question. Mike Awesome came from East. You might have to explain it a little bit more.
When Mike Awesome, you wanted Mike Awesome to show up with the ECW title.
I don't remember that being true, but
Well, he was the ECW champion though when he was jumping over to WCW. So I imagine it seemed as though you wanted him to. There was injunctions to stop the ECW title from showing up on Nitro.
I don't know that that's true either, but
Like,
go ahead.
that's what I'm just going by, like what's on these millions of documentary shows down
So
there.
he's asking you,
It's like-
because Mike didn't show up with the ECW title, is that the reason why you called him the Fat Chick Thriller?
No. No, look, Mike ended up in WCW because of Hulk. Again, I think they were
They were related or
Yeah.
family friends?
Yeah, and nephew, I believe. Could be wrong about that, but
Boulder was his nephew, and Awesome, I think, was his cousin.
okay. Regardless of that, it was Hulk, and yeah, I had heard about Mike Awesome. I knew about Mike Awesome. I wasn't at the time aware whether he was champion or not, and despite a lot of the urban legend that exists, I didn't watch ECW. In fact, I'm not even sure I could have watched it in Atlanta at that time. So I certainly was aware of a lot of things that were going on, but my mission in life was not to rape and pillage ECW and kind of replicate what we did to WWE, you know, from a perception point of view. Mike was available, he wanted to leave. Hulk wanted him to come in, great. That was really the only thing that was behind it. There was no nefarious, you know, alternative, you know, plan or a plan that, you know, I originally wanted to do with him bringing the ECW belt. It's really urban legend.
What did you call Mike Awesome?
I don't remember. I
He
just
was the
remember.
Fat Chick Thriller. And I guarantee that was a Russo gimmick. Let's talk about, you mentioned the Nacho Man and the Huckster and all that stuff as being the first shot back. Let's talk about another classic shot back towards WCW when you had DX converge on the arena in Norfolk, Virginia. It's a classic moment. If you guys don't know, they basically showed up. It was on Raw, showing up at the WCW arena in a tank, trying to get into the arena. Let's tell that story, Bruce.
Well, the backstory to that was we would have these production meetings before television and so on and so forth, and at that time WCW had consistently just, I mean, man, they were kicking our ass at 80 some odd weeks or whatever, and the question came up, it's like, you know, man, what do you do when you got a giant, you know, and of course Vince was David and Ted Turner was Goliath, and what do you do? And it just said, well, you know, back in the old days, we'd go knock on their door. meaning that in the old days of territories, if somebody came into the area that you promoted and started promoting their own shows, you'd go to their show with your toughest guy, show up in the arena and challenge them and call them out. Now, being in the 1990s, you don't just show up and call people out and have fights out in the middle of the street. But the perception of that could be kind of cool. And we were, they were in Norfolk and we were in Hampton. And so we went down and had a tank and went and declared war, firing the first shot at WCW. They declared war on us, so we were declaring war back on them. We had the chief of police with us as our security and had his police helping us out, told us what we could do and what we couldn't do.
Chief of Police of Norfolk?
Yes.
Can't imagine somehow the influence involved in that one.
Yes, he did. And so, you know, and so I'm like, okay, what can we do? What can't we do? He goes, I'm goddamn chief of police. You can do anything you want to do. Okay. Okay, but I also had an attorney in Pittsburgh telling me, Bruce, whatever you do, don't do this, 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 this. So we just went there and you know, made some noise and got noticed and got WCW fans wearing WCW gear coming in, chanting DX, chanting WWF.
You're filming this as people are
We
coming
shot every bit of it. And then the coup de grace, we're asking people, hey, how much did you pay for your tickets? They're all saying, hey, got them free, got them free. But the best part of all is we're sitting there, my cameraman, Tim Wahlberg, who also directed for us, and he says, Bruce, check out the marquee. And I'm watching the marquee, and it says, WCW Nitro tonight, free tickets. Now, and no editing. That is exactly how the marquee read. So we show that, and that's the first thing that we show that night on Raw. WCW Nitro, free tickets. And a quick story just going forward, in the lawsuit, I'm sitting being deposed. And the attorney for WCW is saying, okay, when you edited this footage, I said, we didn't edit the footage. I said, you're looking at raw footage. And he swore up and down. He knew that we edited that footage. Now, if you were to stay with the footage a little longer, you would see it said free tickets, garden show, Sunday. But he's saying, and I said, wait a minute. I said, how can you tell me, because we have people.
So lies by omission are okay.
Well, no. We had people coming into the arena, asking them, and we have all raw footage. No one telling these people what to say. How'd you get your tickets? I got them free. I got them over here, and it was on the marquee. So again, it's war. And, the little guy kicks the big guy with the sidekick. Okay, it was true.
I know we got some questions. We got some very excited people over here that want to ask, but I'm going to make this short. But when we talk about perceptions on the other side of the equation while things are going on, let me give you my perception. One is I'd fired Waltman, who was, in my opinion, you know, whether it's a movie or a band or anything else, it's not just the front guy, it's not just the front man, it's the band. If it's a movie, it's not just the star, it's the cast, the supporting cast. And Waltman, I didn't give him as much credit as I should have at the time, or I wouldn't have let him go. Waltman really made DX feel real. It enhanced the concept of them coming over to us because it was the very attitude of NWO. And quite frankly, we had talked, Kevin, I, Scott, Sean to a degree, a number of other people had talked for many times, months before the DX angle, months before Waltman left, about doing kind of the same thing, not with a tank and dressed up like army men and that kind of shit, but we had talked about showing up at a Raw, live, and kind of taking over. We had gone so far as if Zane Bresloff, you may remember, try to find a way to buy ringside seats, hard camera, so they couldn't not shoot us. So the whole idea of crashing somebody else's show, from my perspective, even though it may not be 100% true, the perception was that this is ripping off they're ripping off the attitude that had been kicking their ass for a year or more. Number two, they're doing it with a guy was Sean Waltman, who was part of that process, and they're kind of taking an idea that we really came up with. In fact, we had talked to Vince Russo over the phone about coming into WCW, and that was part of the phone conversation.
Yeah, well, it's nothing that hadn't been done, though, going back to the 50s as far as wars and guys showing up at other promotions. And that's the tactic that we were taking and looking at it that way. And Waltman coming in, and that was I believe his first appearance on Raw, too, as well. So we capitalized on that. Shawn Michaels was out. Sean Waltman and his X-Pac was in. And so it was new, it was fresh. And hey, it was
And it was
all
awesome.
fair game.
It was awesome. I have to give
So
credit to
you're
that.
inside the arena, you're doing whatever you're doing, taking notes or putting together the show, and who comes and tells you, Eric, we have a problem?
You know, I wish I remembered specifically that moment in time, because I would love to go back and do it over again if I ever had the opportunity. I'm not really sure, but I think I was actually in the ring when that was happening. I think I was doing a segment in the ring, if I remember.
Were you
correctly.
filming during Nitro? Or did you film earlier in the day?
Both.
Okay.
Both. We had been out there before their show started, but I think they started an hour before. So I'm pretty sure that when we went down, because we weren't going to go down the tunnel.
There's a tunnel that goes to the arena.
And there's a big overhead door, and we weren't going to go down there because every time that we would drive by, they'd shut the door. And so we're like, okay, and Nash and Luger were late coming in, and they were like calling Hunter, trying to say, hey man, are you on top of the tank in front of our building? And it's like, yeah, come on over. And they were late. But anyway, we went by, we just kept going by, and all of a sudden it's like that door's open. And they didn't shut it this time. So we just took a right turn and went on down, and they shut the door in our face and everything. And you know, there's always the talk of, what if that door opened and Ming was standing there? Haku. Yeah. I know my pants would have been a different color. But, you know, there's that. We were outnumbered. Huh?
Did you ever consider opening the door? Or what
I
did you think?
didn't really know about it till after it had happened, and that's why. And I'm sitting here trying to remember, where exactly was I standing when I first heard that? I think I was in the ring, and by that time, security, Doug Dillinger, I think, had pretty much taken control of the situation. I was hearing it most likely in an IFB, or unless somebody came up to me and told me, while I was in the ring. And it was kind of being taken care of, and I didn't really have time to think about it very much, but I wished I would have had an extra 5 minutes. I really do.
And then we fast forward 2 weeks to when we went to the CNN Tower. First we went to the offices in Smyrna with a tank, and I think I told this on your radio show. I wish I had the 911 call, because the guy from WCW calls and says, yeah, we're being attacked with weapons. They've got tank and they're armed. They've got weapons. And all of Smyrna's finest descend, and they come out guns drawn on us. We've got it on tape. And I'm like, oh shit, this is great television. But I did have Smyrna cops as my security for that too, but he hadn't told his boss. Smyrna didn't have the chief. I don't think they had one, but they, were there, and he told me to go to the airport, one of those, don't pass go, don't collect your $200, get out of town. And we did after we stopped at CNN Center. So those were fun. Those were a blast.
Can you imagine the legalities or just the awesome moment in television if you would have said, open the door?
And that's one of my biggest
Like,
regrets.
what would you have done? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
I don't know, but it would have been some of the greatest television in the history of wrestling television. And that's the one, people ask me, what's your biggest regret? Well, first of all, I don't have a lot of regrets because I don't live in the past. You can't change things that, happened 5 years ago or 5 minutes ago. It's over, it's done. You can learn from it, you move on. But if there was one thing that I could change, I would have to put that right up on the list. I would have loved to let them in, only because the confrontation, and I don't expect it would have ever gotten physical because everybody was too smart for that. And the guys like Ming and the people that could, Fit Finley, and people that were kind of dangerous people, they weren't going to go there. They're not defending their company. but it would have been some freaking good television.
It would have been good for a while, and then it probably would have ended up sucking because no one would have done anything.
Yeah, what would
Like,
you
what would you
have
have done?
taken the steam
Hey,
out of it,
you,
exactly.
get out of here. Make us get out of here. And then, 10 minutes is just sitting there, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
What about this man in the red? He's been waiting a long time here.
Eric, what did you think when good old JR said, we're bringing back our buddies Razor and Diesel, and they're going to be on Monday Night Raw?
The fake Razor and Diesel.
Honestly, it didn't really faze me too much. I was, okay. That one didn't really.
Kevin Nash said, and I don't know if you've seen it, but Kevin Nash said that you had to give them more money because you thought that they had to sign deal memos. He said.
Yeah, you know what? I don't want to argue that one, but I don't recall that at all.
Monday night, in the wrestling show that they had on, they still have it on now, where they show with the round table of all the wrestlers. When they did it was the NWO one with Kevin Nash. He was talking about that, and that's one of the things he talked about. That's why I brought it up.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate the question, but so much of this stuff, and again, I wish I had more specific memories of some of these bigger moments. I wish I had copies of agreements that we could refer back to, and different people remember different things in different ways. But I don't recall that one, brother. I don't think I took it that serious.
All right, you're done. What about tell us about this fake Diesel and fake Razor. Whose idea was that?
I will give him 100% credit, Jerry McDivitt. The
Do you
attorney.
think it would work?
It wasn't to work. The idea behind it wasn't necessarily for it to work and be successful. The idea behind it was to prove that we own those intellectual properties. That we own Diesel and we can take anybody that we want, give them a Spanish accent, have them flick a toothpick, dress them up, and call them Razor Ramon because by God, we own that property.
So the idea was to prove a legal point.
Yeah.
To create horseshit television?
Oh. It would have had to improve a lot to just be horseshit.
It was.
That's what you get for letting an attorney book your show, brother. Yeah, it was.
Can't even debate it.
Wow, man. Yeah. Okay, next question.
Because when I originally heard about it, because my friend played Razor, I was like, well, there's different James Bonds and there's different Batmans, and trying to make it feel better. Maybe it could work. Let's talk about another of the pivotal moments in the Monday Night Wars, which was the Montreal Screwjob and Brett leaving WWE and coming to WCW, which was huge at the time because Brett was, if not the most popular wrestler in the WWE, top 2 or 3 at the time. What were your discussions with Brett? What led to Brett leaving in the first place? I know it's been talked about for years, but I want to hear it. And since I'm up here, that's the question I'm asking.
Do you want to go first, Bruce? I had, and again, I don't recall dates specifics, but I had a conversation with Brett about a year previously, I believe, year and a half. Got along great with Brett. I think I met him in LA. We met at a hotel, and I liked him. He just felt like a real down-to-earth person to me, and he was a great performer and a great character. I looked up to him in that respect. And we got along really well, but for whatever reason, we didn't do a deal. And it wasn't, because I didn't offer him enough money. There was no animosity or tension. It was just we agreed that it was probably not a good opportunity, and we went our separate ways. And then we started talking again. I don't remember if he called me or I called him. He probably would have called me by that time because I was getting my ass kicked legally for a lot of other things that I had been doing. So by that time, I was very cautious about infringing in any way on WWF contracts. So I would assume Brett called me and we met again and we talked. We talked over the phone a lot, and he decided to make the move. And I remember I was in Wyoming when I had the conversation. I actually remember exactly where I was standing when I was on the phone with him. And he asked me about bringing a belt, and should I bring that with me? And I said, not necessary. And it was, well, what if they want me to drop the belt? You dropped the belt. It's okay. You're Bret Hart. You're not Bret Hart the belt. You're Bret Hart. People will still know who you are and respect you and want to watch you, whether you have the belt or not, or you drop it in a minute. It didn't matter to me. But that was the thinking.
You didn't think about, considering that you've done that already with Medusa, about having Bret come on TV with the WWF title?
No, by that time we were engaged in federal litigation, and, copyright infringement, all kinds of other crap. Even if I would have wanted to do it, I would have an army full of attorneys from Turner Broadcasting that would have stomped a mud hole in me.
Bret. Canadian hero. Bret, he did, Eric, they had talked like a year before, and it was at a time when Bret's contract was coming up. Vince offered Bret a very lucrative contract, paying him the most money of anybody he'd ever paid before in the history of the company. And as he got into it, Bret wasn't happy. And it went on and on and on. And then it got to the point where Vince was paying him so much money and looking at this going, I can't continue to do this anymore. And he went to Bret and he said, look, if the deal's still on the table for WCW, or if you want to use me as leverage for WCW, go. You have my blessing to go back to them, get the best deal that you can, and tell them you're in a bidding war, whatever you want to do. And so that's how the second one of Bret actually leaving came about on the WWF side. But Bret going into Montreal, it just was a difficult time. The animosity between Bret and Shawn at the time, and going back and forth debating what we were going to do for that finish. And Vince deciding, whatever, the night before, and told very few people and did what he needed to do because he wasn't confident.
Did you know about it?
Chance.
Did you know about it, Bruce?
No.
So
No.
you were surprised as everybody.
I was just sitting there with Davey Boy and Owen, and Davey looking at the monitor going, they just fucked him. Owen, they fucked him. What do we do?
Bruce, let me ask you, if Vince would have known, I don't mean to take over the monitor, if Vince would have known, because there's no way he could have gotten inside of my head and known the pressure I was under legally, he wouldn't have been able to know that there was no, I told Bret not to worry about the belt. Do you think he would have done it anyway? If he would have known that I had no intention to use that, or to take the belt, you think he would have done
because
it?
that was Bret's last night, and the belt needed to change hands from Bret to Shawn, storyline-wise, to do everything that we wanted to do with Austin and everybody going forward. That needed to happen, and just to have Shawn win it some other way, and it took on a life of its own afterwards and got even better. But yeah, I think he still would have done it because Bret. I don't know that Bret he wasn't really rational at the time in a lot of respects. He has so much shit going on in his head, and I think if Bret were the Bret of 10 years before, never would have gotten to that point.
Here's an interesting question. What was your perspective of that when you heard about it? We've never heard from your side. You've got this guy coming in, one of the biggest names in the business, and hear about the Montreal screw job.
I actually heard about it from Rick Rude about 5 minutes after it happened. Rick Rude was in the locker room, I believe, or near it, and knew that Bret had knocked out Vince or whatever he did, dropped him. And Rude was pissed. Rude was pissed that they screwed Bret. Rick Rude called me and said, can I come to work tomorrow for you? And then he told me what happened. I was shocked, but it didn't affect the way I looked at anything. It didn't affect the way I looked at Bret, didn't affect the way I thought we would be able to utilize Bret, because I wasn't dependent upon him winning and keeping the belt, coming over as the former champion anyway. So in many respects it didn't matter from that perspective. But the fact that they did it the way they did it, I was pretty shocked that it would happen.
Probably in the back of your mind you're thinking too, like, oh, he's really going to love being here now.
No, that thought didn't occur to me, honestly. It really didn't.
Let's talk quickly about Rick Rude, the only guy that ever appeared on Raw and Nitro on the same night.
And that's why.
Big pop for that. Yeah, it was live. Yeah. You guys take it.
Big pop for that. That was great. Yeah,
WWE was taped.
We
Tape
were,
show.
we were taped.
Nitro was live.
And Rick Rude and Sean and everybody, because Rude stayed and did TV. And we had Rude and Sean and Hunter and everybody opening up our show and new champion, blah, blah, blah. And they started an hour before us. We did live voiceovers in the studio. So we had Nitro on in the studio, and there's Rick Rude. And it's like, well, fuck. And at that point, what could you do? I think Vince made a comment about, if you think you're seeing double, something like that. But it was, hey man, hats off, that was a good one.
You must have loved that.
That was a good one.
I did. Yeah, it did. It fell right in that same category as giving away finishes and starting 5 minutes before them and dropping titles and trash and all kinds of other crazy stuff that was fun at that time. But yeah, I did. I liked it.
Because even better was he shaved his beard too, so he had bearded Rude and non-bearded Rude. At the
I
same
forgot
time.
about that, but yeah.
Yeah, at the same time, I remember it was so crazy. What do you got there, big guy?
Yeah, you got Bret Hart, to put it bluntly, how did you screw that up? I mean, you had him, you didn't do anything with him.
How did you screw up Bret Hart? That's what he's asking.
You had the second most popular, first most popular wrestler in WWE, and you really didn't do anything with him. You ended up like feeding him to Goldberg. Goldberg screwed Bret. Yeah.
Valid point, but not entirely true in context. Bret, and I, to this day, and I've read some of the things that he says about me and how he feels about me, and that's okay. I get it. I still respect him as a talent, what he accomplished, and as a person, in many ways. And what I'm about to say isn't meant to be disparaging in any way or take any responsibility off of myself, because I had the responsibility to try to make that investment in him worthwhile. And I clearly failed. My bad. However, I was working with a talent, Bret, who he wasn't the Bret he was a year before or 5 years before. Bret was down. I think Bret was, between what happened with Owen, the screw job, which he took very personally. I mean, that was devastating to him from my perspective at that very time. He didn't really show up to play. And again, I like to use examples. Chris is in the music business. If you show up to perform in front of a live crowd and your heart isn't in it, you show up 5 minutes before you go on and you don't really feel it, it doesn't matter who wrote the song for you. It doesn't matter if the rest of your band is the best in the world. If you're not feeling it, you don't care, the performance is going to kind of suck for the most part. And that was, in many respects, what Bret was going through. He had gone through so much personally that he'd show up to the arena half an hour before the show. No matter what we tried, I couldn't really threaten him too much. He was brand new. We tried to get him to show up on time, never would show up on time. He'd show up and he didn't really engage. He didn't ask questions. He didn't make suggestions. He didn't do the things a guy like Chris does in his career, or The Rock, or Stone Cold Steve Austin, or any of the other people that, they take ownership of their characters and they make things happen in many respects. Bret not only didn't want to do the things that we were hoping he would do, when he did do them, he did them with such half-assed attempts because he just didn't care anymore, in my opinion. And that was part of the problem too.
There's so much momentum, Bruce, at this point in time, that I'm going to interrupt your text there.
I'm trying to make sure that I have enough time to be here. I don't have to leave. That's all. I'm changing my flight.
There you go. So much momentum for WCW at this point in time, and I believe we were discussing it earlier. It was either 81 weeks, 88 weeks, something in the 80s, over a year and a half of WCW destroying Raw. And then, Rude or Brett leaves, and even little things like Rude leaving, because everybody was leaving, and Eric would hire them. We used to laugh. It's like, if you work for Vince, Eric will hire you. Virgil shows up, and Michael Wall Street is there, and Brian Adams is there, and Neidhart is there, and Davey shows up, and everybody's coming over. Are you guys reeling right now? Did you think, like, what can we do? What's going to happen? How low can we go? What's going on in the office at this point?
Around the Montreal Screwjob time?
Well, because that was at the point where WWE, I think, was at its lowest, because everybody now can't wait to go to WCW.
Well, yes and no, but see, also what was happening, television-wise, we were getting our ass kicked. But in the arena business, we were packing them in. Merchandising, we were packing them in. Success begets success. And with Nitro's success, just that helped us even more, because wrestling was hot again. And so they were kicking our ass in the ratings, and they were just stomping a mud hole in us. Underneath that arena business and all the other ancillaries, they were growing, and it was really good. But Montreal, it was kind of afterwards, it was like a fresh beginning in many ways, because you had Brett kind of last holdout to go to WCW. You had Sean, who really didn't have his buddies anymore. Scott and Big Kev were gone, and all he had was Hunter, and Hunter wasn't the political powerhouse he is now. And Sean knew that at WrestleMania that year, he was gone. He was done, and he was going to go away. So underneath all that, there was this groundswell of younger guys, and guys that hadn't had as much TV time that were getting noticed. And you had this guy, Stone Cold Steve Austin, who was getting red hot. And then the big turning point was the baddest man on the planet, Mike Tyson, shows up on Raw. And we just had momentum. We just started gaining momentum once we took a commentator, historically for the WWF, his entire career, and said, hey folks, he's the owner of the company. And Bret Hart punched him out in the locker room. And he sits there with his pale black eyes.
Kind of sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah. And he sits there with his pale black eyes and says, Bret screwed Bret. It does, you're right. Because we realized we had to change. It's like, okay, well, let's make some changes here, do something different.
Bruce, if I can, I'm going to go back and to answer in part the question you asked, because it just occurred to me as you guys were talking, to put it in to put Bret in context, and in what he was going through and what we were faced with. I was in Los Angeles the night Owen died. I was at, it doesn't matter the name of the hotel. I was at a hotel in Los Angeles. We were scheduled to do Jay Leno the following day. Bret was on his way to LA to meet me to do the Leno show so I could push him. I heard about Owen while I was at the hotel on a phone call, because I couldn't watch pay-per-view at a hotel. Heard about it. I went to the airport to meet Bret, because he was literally in the air, if I remember correctly. Because it was late, and I went to the airport to meet him. And I was thinking, I have to tell Bret what happened, because he's an airplane. How's he going to get the news? This was before you could, they didn't have wireless on planes back then. And that's how our relationship started. That's where Bret started with WCW. So that was the starting point, just to put that in context. And what Bruce is saying, that's also when we started feeling the power shift. When that situation happened with Bret, and it got physical, and then they brought Vince out, and all of a sudden he's no longer just the announcer with a padded suit. He's the owner, and it was Mike Tyson, and it was Steve Austin. Oh shit, we're in trouble now.
But let's take a step back. Before that, WCW is on top, and there's a real sense of arrogance. I always felt a sense of arrogance from you in that, we're kicking their ass every week. This is so easy. WWE was forced to go to a youth movement, and WCW had all the older players on top, and a lot of younger guys working kind of the mid card and the opening card. There was nowhere to move up for the younger guys because the top of the card was so packed with names, whereas WWF, the top match was always great, but the undercard was kind of shitty. WWE, the undercard was good. The top match might have drawn money, but the matches were never great. Did that ever bother you, or did you not care? You're drawing; it doesn't matter.
I think at the time, looking back at it now, certainly I feel differently about it, so it's hard to...
At the time, though.
But at that time, I knew our bench was very deep at the top. It was working. I believed that, and I hate to say mid-card, you know, if you're an actor, you're an actor. Whether you're the star of the show or you're a supporting cast member, sometimes the supporting cast members actually make the actor look better than they really are. But I believe, yes, we had deep bench strength at the top, so I didn't feel the need and didn't have the vision to escalate younger talent and move some of those guys out of the way because they were working. For the most part, it was working. And I felt like the middle of our show, all the things that happened before the main event was freaking awesome. It was, you know, with the cruiserweight division and a lot of the other stuff. And yeah, we had some weak spots in our show. Every show does. But I didn't feel the need to at that time. I didn't have the vision. I wish I would have, but I didn't.
And to the contrary, I believe it was 97, 98, or 96, 97, 98. On average, we introduced, because I did it, and I went back and did the list, we introduced on average 18 new talent per year. From the Edges and the Christians, the Kurt Angles, the Rocks, I mean, you name it, we did it between 18 and 20 really every year for that 3 years through our developmental system. We did camps with Dory Funk. We brought guys in and they would spend 3 weeks in Stamford around the machine, and we'd go, okay, this guy's got it, this guy doesn't, him, and they would be in the gym working out with Vince McMahon and be around the machine. And that's, we looked around and said, we're not going to get guys back from, we don't want guys back from WCW. And they weren't creating talent. There wasn't a lot out there, you know, places weren't territories, so it was like, okay, started going to all these independents everywhere, all over the country, cherry picking the guys. Come on in and let's see what you got.
You know, I'll take exception to that about creating talent. And the you know, we didn't have a front, we had the power plant. That was, you know, it is what it is, or was what it was. But nothing really phenomenal came out of it, other than Bill Goldberg, I guess, could fall into kind of a star category in some respects, many respects. But what
At the time, all respect.
yeah,
Goldberg
but,
was huge.
but we brought him out too soon. We threw him out before he was ready. We took a guy with no wrestling experience and put him through the machine, and bam, he was like one of the biggest things, you know, on the show before he should have been, in my opinion. But what we were doing was bringing in Chris Jericho's, Dean Malenko's, you know, bringing in luchadors, you know, Chris Benoit's, Eddie Guerrero's. People that, yes, they had been in the business before. It's not like we found them in a bar and created them from scratch. Neither did a lot of those other people we were just talking about come from nowhere. They'd been somewhere before too. But we were bringing in people from all over the world. We weren't creating them, but we were exposing brand new, fresh talent, some of it young talent that, yes, have been working before, but now they're on a national platform. So a little bit of an exception to that.
That's a fair point, because you guys did. And it just, but we were looking at, and again, we created brand new, different. We took the guys that were out there and made them different. And you guys were taking and exposing, like I said, the luchadors and the Malenkos and the Jerichos and Eddie Guerreros.
In retrospect, Eric, though, you say that you look back, did you feel that maybe you could have utilized guys that you just mentioned in a bigger role? Because I remember you told me once it takes 10 years of TV experience to become a top guy. But you had a guy like Eddie Guerrero who was getting more heat than most of the NWO, if not as much, and still would never be able to get to the next step as far as put Eddie in there in a feud with Sting, or a feud with Luger, or a feud with, you know, whoever it was that was kind of working, Savage, for example. That never happened, even though the fans were treating some of the guys as bigger names than they were. Do you still feel that it was the right move to keep everybody kind of in their areas?
No, it was a mistake. clearly. And one of the things, if I could go back in time and do differently, I would. Obviously, knowing then what I wish I would have. But at the same time, I still believe, by the way, that it takes a good 8-10 years for the audience. Not in my opinion, does it take that long for someone to become a great performer. I think people can become great performers much sooner than that. But the wrestling audience doesn't readily accept new characters and young talent as a whole. Steve Austin had been in the wrestling business a long time before anybody ever heard Stone Cold Steve Austin. It takes a long time, and in my opinion then especially, I underestimated probably the strength of some of those people by subscribing to that. It takes a lot longer than that attitude.
What do you think, NWO?
Steve Austin was on Vince's podcast on the network, and he asked him if Vince is out of touch. Well, when I was a kid, we had Doink the Clown. Steve Austin created Stone Cold. Triple H and Shawn Michaels created DX. Was Vince McMahon not marketably, because marketing he's a genius, but creatively, was he ever truly in touch with the audience?
Well, first of all, Vince McMahon created Degeneration X. That's his creation, that's his baby, out of his mouth, out of his head. And he took those two guys in China to do it, okay? Because, and if you really want to give the credit to who gave him the idea, it was Bret Hart. Yes, really, yes. Because Bret does nothing but a bunch
I've
of
never heard
shit.
that before. See what you're finding out here at the Great Debate Show.
Great question.
Yeah, but it was Bret, and Vince looks at him and goes, yeah. He goes, it's a whole generation of just they're degenerates. They're the X generation. They're the degenerate. You know, I mean, but that's how that came. Long hair. Yeah. And then what was the other part of the? He's out of touch.
Is he out of touch? Was he in touch? Because
Sure, without a doubt he was in touch, man. But see, he's 70 years old now, okay? He's a billionaire. He drives a Bentley. I don't think he's ever put gas. I'm gonna put it in perspective for you though. I don't know that he's ever put gas in his car. He can't tell you how much a gallon of milk is, a loaf of bread, or a dozen eggs. So, but the son of a bitch has a knack for it. And he's the closest thing I've ever met to a genius.
marketing and promoting, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, when you guys, as you had events creating, we were getting a lot of Doinks and Dukes and Dumpster Drosies and
Yeah, characters, because that was the era that worked. It was
Bandingos.
no.
Well, if I can just, there's always two sides of the WWE coin. There has been, and that's Vince. He's all about the entertainment, and yes, he's still in touch, and yes, he's still a genius, and yes, he's insane.
and again, also Doink the Clown. Doink the Clown, the original Doink the Clown, Matt Bourne, was over and was great and drew some money. And that idea came from Hawk, Mike Hegstrand, who just sat there in a Toronto dressing room looking at Matt Bourne with a cigarette hanging out of his mouth going, he's Krusty the Clown. And he became Doink.
Bruce, if I may, and this is a really odd situation because now I'm going to be defending Bruce and Vince McMahon, back at that time. But what the audience, what people don't sometimes understand completely is that when you watch a wrestling show, you may not have liked Doink the Clown at that time, or maybe looking at it now especially, but there were a lot of fans that did. A wrestling show, whether it's a 1 hour show or 2 hour show, it's kind of like a really cool buffet where you've got to have a very animated type of character like Doink the Clown or Duke the Droser Dumpster or somebody like that. And you've got to have a real kind of character like Stone Cold Steve Austin. It's not one size fits all when it comes to creative. And, I like you guys. I mean, I look at Vince a lot differently now than I did then. And, whether he's a creative genius or not, he's a genius. He's a smart man. And one with a lot of vision.
Did you think at any point in time that you would take over the business and maybe not put WWE out of business, but be the all-time #1 company and become the new Vince? We're gonna beat them forever. This is what's gonna happen.
First of all, I never really saw myself in that position. It was never my goal. My goal, going all the way back, my goal was I never had a goal to get into the wrestling business. It kind of happened. It was a coincidence. And once I did, I was so grateful just to have a job, number one, and a job in the wrestling business. I didn't aspire to be a Vince McMahon or a Verne Gagne or anything. It just all kind of happened. But once we got to where we did with Nitro and with WCW, that was really inexperience in me kind of really manifest, because I never consciously thought, oh, this is going to last forever. This is easy. I never thought that. But I also never realized how fickle success can be and how quickly it can turn on a dime. I thought we were there, we had support, we had the audience, the formula was working. I really didn't have a sense that it could end in a month or 6 months or a year.
So what was it that, in your opinion, that caused it to end after 80 some odd weeks of being on top? What was it that started the fall?
There's never one thing, you know what I mean? It's a combination of many, many, many things. Some of it my fault, some of it just, inexperience, some of it bad choices. But a lot of it had to do with things that didn't have anything to do with me. It had to do with AOL Time Warner. It had to do with the fact that Ted Turner was no longer in control of Ted Turner's company. The biggest advocate, the only reason that Nitro ever happened was because of Ted Turner. And Ted Turner didn't know that they were pulling the rug out from under Ted Turner. I didn't realize that executives within the Turner organization were picking sides from whether they wanted to be on this side of the Time Warner camp, or they wanted to be over here with Turner, or now do they want to be over here with AOL? There was just so many things going on at the time, including my own mistakes, that really led to what it led to.
In your opinion, Bruce, what led to WWE finally taking the lead?
I think adapting a more realistic viewpoint of the business and trying some things. And without a doubt, the character Mr. McMahon that evolved, going in doing that interview with Brett Screwed Brett, there was no intention of a Mr. McMahon character to come out of that at all. But Vince was the kind of guy that he put blinders on. He was an announcer, and nobody knows that I own the goddamn company but you. So yeah, and then he was a little out of touch. But that was not the intent with that particular interview, and it grew. And Vince would walk out in arenas to go host Raw, and people booed the shit out of him.
I know the feeling.
Yeah, me too. And so
Vince was supposed to be a babyface.
And Vince, he saw himself as, I'm a play-by-play guy. And when the stuff happened with Tyson, it just organically happened. And Austin and Vince had a chemistry that I think has been unmatched by anybody. We got momentum, and then we took over, and he poured gas on it.
Tyson was a big part of that. Did you ever try and get Tyson?
No. And so I read somewhere recently that someone said that I had told them I was trying to get Mike Tyson. I mean, look, there's a lot of things that happened 20 years ago, 15 years ago that I don't remember, so I'm not saying it's impossible, but man, I don't remember that one. When I read it, I went, really? I don't ever remember talking to anybody associated with Mike Tyson. But regardless of that, and I answered your question. I may not have done it as well as I could have, as far as when things started turning around and when I sensed them, or when I thought that might happen. I knew when that happened, when they brought in Mike Tyson, when they advertised and announced Mike Tyson, I knew then that I was going to be in trouble, because that was a big, big move. The other point was when they took out a Super Bowl ad. Because up until that point, WWF was getting their asses kicked financially. They were in pretty dire straits. I had heard that they were taking the water coolers out of the Titan Towers because I couldn't afford the water service any longer. I mean,
really?
Yeah, I had heard that.
Is that true?
Yeah.
So no water, damn it. So when I had read that they were taking out, and I think it was $1 million at the time. When you're spending $1 million on a Super Bowl ad, I thought, somebody's getting serious. That's a big, ballsy move. And then on top of that, it's Mike Tyson. And then when I saw the Austin, Tyson, McMahon thing, I go, oh shit, now we really are in trouble.
There was a.
Oh, I'm sorry, but here's the funny part about that. All that stuff that we did with Tyson going forward, and this is coming from a company where you go WrestleMania to WrestleMania, at least you had a general plan. We were in San Jose, California, did the deal with Tyson. It was so electric and so hot, we sat down right after that show and mapped out everything to WrestleMania. Because we only had 2 more dates on Tyson. He was so pumped. He was like, shit, yeah, man, whatever. Fuck, I'll get in and knock somebody out. But coming off that adrenaline, I mean, we had him for 2 more dates. And it's like, God, that's hot. I mean, this is going to be something. And we mapped out the rest of the promotion right there. And then we added shit as we went.
You said that you'd heard that WWE was couldn't afford water in Titan Towers.
Okay, we were allowed to flush between 12 and 12:30. Okay?
And only for number 2.
Only for number 2. If it's yellow, let it mellow. If it's brown, flush it down.
I mean, you had a meeting, I remember, in St. Louis at the Nitro was so big, we did domes on a weekly basis for 2, 3, 4 months in a row. You had a team meeting where you said that I've heard that WWE will be closing within the next 6 months. This is a guaranteed thing. They're closing down. Do you recall that meeting, and what did you hear? You mentioned that the sponsors were getting angry because of the Attitude Era and the filth and the smut. Do you remember that?
I don't remember that.
Sure.
There we go. I don't remember that meeting, okay? But I absolutely agree that it happened. Obviously, you were there. There was probably a couple things going on in my mind, I'm guessing, since I don't remember exactly where I had gotten my information from. But I had gotten information like they got to take the water cooler out of the building because I can't afford to service any longer. And there were other things that are kind of like that, none of which I can recall in real detail. But probably a lot of what I was trying to do too is convince talent that, this is where you need to be. This is where, don't be thinking about jumping ship, because guys were getting a little antsy at that time. And it was a little bit about me trying to hold on to what we had. There was information that was coming to me from our advertising division in New York City that advertisers were really not reacting well to the kind of over-the-top shit that was going on within the Attitude areas. This, middle fingers and giving birthday hands and tits coming out and all kinds of other crazy stuff. Sorry about that. There was a lot of things that were going on that advertisers were upset about. And honestly, I can't say if I was convinced 100% or if I was trying to convince myself and others that it was true. But I can see myself doing that. Part of my nature.
Now, the saying is telephone, telegraph, tele-wrestler. You must have heard about this meeting. Did you hear about it? That Eric was...
We heard they all had meetings all the time, but so did we. We were constantly trying to rally the troops to let them know that, the future's bright. You stay here, you work hard, and the talent was seeing the difference in their pay is we were drawing more people in the houses and what have you. It was discouraging getting your butt kicked in television ratings. But they started seeing more money in their paychecks, and they're going, shit, we might actually turn this around. So there was light at the end of the tunnel. So there was, we had a lot of those rah-rah speeches too. So, I mean, it went back and forth.
Let's go to this guy back there with the white hat. You've had your hand up all day.
Guys, big story about the Monday Night Wars that you guys talked about were guys jumping back and forth. Eric, was there anyone looking back now that you signed that you wished you didn't? And at the same time, was there anyone that you negotiated with, and it may not even have been made public, that you wished you would have signed that may have, maybe not swung the war completely, but would have given you guys more momentum?
I'll answer the last question first. No, the answer to that is no. There was nobody that I ever wanted. God, if I could just get The Undertaker, if we could just get Shawn Michaels or anybody else, with all due respect to them, that just wasn't the way I thought at that time. In terms of, was there anybody that I signed that I wish I wouldn't have?
Master P.
Honestly, you have no idea how right you are. You don't, and I'm gonna share it with you in just a second. There were mistakes. There were things that didn't work out. We talked about Brett, you know. But you know what? Nobody has a mic that works.
It's your thumbs.
And nobody has a crystal ball. Some things work out, some things don't. From where I sit right now, I don't regret any of those decisions because you have to try. And I wouldn't want to take anything away from anybody. So, hope that answers
Talk
it.
about the Master P thing.
Master P, hey, it was just, like what I just said. Some things work out, some things don't. But here, Baltimore, we're in Baltimore. We're doing the whole deal with Master P and the Raps Crab Hang, and Master P comes into my dressing room. You remember those in my office? Those offices were really small, right? And he comes into my office with about, I don't know how he squeezed 15 guys that big and that small of an office, but he did. I don't know how many there were a lot of them. And they were all big, and they all looked really pissed off. And he came to me about something. I don't know what, it was a creative thing. Somebody got in his ear, stirred some shit up about the finish or something. He came in and essentially threatened to shoot me. No, I'm not saying kind of inferred. There were guys reaching into their jackets, okay? No shit. And I thought, man, I'm not afraid of dying, but I sure don't want to go in this little office surrounded by a bunch of people I don't know on the other wrong end of a bullet. But I remember that, and I thought, man, I can't wait for this to be over with.
Here's one more thing I want to bring up. Do you remember when you challenged Vince McMahon to a fight in the middle?
Oh yeah, that was awesome.
He came down from the rafters on a motorcycle, like this, with his feet on the thing, and just like came down. From what I recall, and you're like, we win so many weeks in a row, it's not even hard anymore, and you challenge Vince to a fight. What did Vince think about this?
Vince just looked at it as a desperate attempt to try and, get something by mentioning his name. There were the jokes of whether or not he should just actually go and show up and so on and so forth, and but no, he never really took it seriously. He just thought it was
It was funny because that was, and to a degree, he was right. When we were, Waltman had gone over. That was following the DX thing. I wouldn't say we were desperate because the numbers didn't reflect the need to be at that point, but clearly shit had started to shift a little bit, and it was in some ways, I guess you could say, it was desperate. But I remember Hulk Hogan saying, "Brother, you don't want to do that." At first, I told him, "This is what I'm going to do." He goes, "Oh, that's great, brother. That's going to be great." And then as we got closer to the date, he said, "Maybe you need to think about that because you don't know Vince McMahon the way I know Vince McMahon." And I didn't. I just looked at him. He's a big guy. He wears this padded suit. How tough can he be? And I didn't really care about that. I've had my ass kicked so many times in my life. Get in line. It's no big deal. And if I would have been able to get my ass kicked by Vince McMahon on a pay-per-view, I'd have taken that ass kicking once a week for 52 weeks. So that part didn't bother me. But there were some people that were a little bit concerned, and I was hoping he would show up. I was ready for it either way.
What about this dude back there, man? Looking at you.
That's Lewis, by the way.
Lewis.
Question for both of you. Okay, talk about your deal, Eric, about New Japan Pro Wrestling, and Bruce, I want to know about what happened with the deal with All Japan Pro Wrestling in 1998.
I'll take the first part if you don't mind, Bruce. I'll give you a second on that one. New Japan Pro Wrestling was a great opportunity for us. You know, WCW had done business with New Japan previous to me, you know, being in charge, but I had relationships with people who were very well. You know, Brad Reigns was the American agent, I guess, or representative for New Japan in the United States. Brad and I went to high school together. Brad wrestled at the same time he was a year older than me, and for a different school, but we knew of each other going back to, you know, when I was 17 years old. So through that relationship with Brad, I was able to engage in a great conversation with New Japan and build on his relationship there and do some great business. It was a very positive experience.
Oh yeah, so that's flip side to All Japan. They were never serious. Jerry Briscoe and I flew over to meet with Baba, and Jerry Briscoe, his brother Jack, NWA World Champion, dropped the belt to Baba when he wasn't supposed to, did all this stuff, worked for Baba for many years. We get there after our umpteen-hour trip over there, and they say, well, we'll have tickets for you at the will call at Hurricane Hall. And I'm sitting there, Jerry Briscoe's, tickets? They want us to fucking sit and watch a goddamn Japanese wrestling card? Like, okay. So we show up about 2 hours into the show, and they're keeping us away from everybody, and Baba comes out, does his warm-up, and all the Japanese photographers go over, snapping pictures. Oh, Mr. Baba. So I'm like, okay, watch this. So I walk right through them, walk up to Baba. Hello, Mr. Baba, introduce myself. I didn't know him. Jerry, hey, Baba. And this son of a bitch just smiles and doesn't say one word to us. Dr. Death Steve Williams was there. And he pulled us back in the dressing room, say hello to Gary Albright, Doc, Johnny Ace, who was their booker. And they get us out of there as quickly as they can. Now, all of a sudden, we've got a chauffeured limousine getting us the fuck out of the place. Before, we had to take a taxi, find our way to Hurricane Hall, and get our tickets for Mrs. Baba. So the next day, we meet with Baba. Now, as I mentioned, Jerry Briscoe had done business with Baba for years. He brings Johnny Ace and some other guy to be his translator, a translator. Baba's dealt with Americans for 50 years. And he sat there and had a translator.
He speaks perfect English.
He speaks perfect English. He spoke for years perfect English to Jerry Briscoe and refused to converse with us in English.
That's amazing, really.
Oh, and Briscoe, and so, you know, they kept telling us, now they had requested the meeting, by the way, and we'd gone over for smaller promotions and sent certain guys and got good money for them, so we told them what we expected for The Rock, Shawn Michaels, Steve Austin, Undertaker, and let's slide the paper back, go, Japanese people don't know these guys. They don't know any of your talent. And Jerry Briscoe stands up, tears the paper up, and says, well, what the fuck did we fly over here for then?
I love Jerry.
And we left. And told Johnny came running down and says, hey man, that was real disrespectful. I said, you're right. That was disrespectful, that son of a bitch to sit there and not speak. I don't mean to speak ill of the dead, but it was disrespectful to Jerry. I don't care about me. Jerry had done business with this guy face to face for years. And he refused to communicate with us in English. And my Japanese is a shit. So that's what happened. They weren't serious. And so we made a lot of money dealing with smaller groups and then did it on our own.
There's a lot of pretty girls here. Does any girls have a question? There you do. It's Shawn Michaels' hat.
Yes, I'm a huge Shawn Michaels fan. My question is the screw job. If Vince were to come to you, would you have done the same thing? And do you think Shawn Michaels did the right thing? Like, if Vince was like, you're screwing Brett tonight, would you have done it?
Probably. And the basic bottom line is this, and both these guys will understand, is that it's business. And if the boss tells you to do it, and explains the reasons why, I probably would have done it, because I don't have Bret Hart paying my bills to feed my family. And also too, and I've talked to Sean about this, if you do something like that, it's probably pretty shitty, but you'll always have Vince owing you a favor, which in this business is a big deal. So unless it was my super best friend, I might have a problem with it, but if it was just a business decision, I probably would do it. I'm old school, so.
The guy with the Telly Savalas. You, yes.
No one knows who that is here. It's from the 70s. AKA bald guy.
Go ahead.
Question for you. How come it took Raw, because Raw was a 1-hour show and Nitro was 2 hours. How come it took a year and a half to make it a 2-hour show?
Because we didn't own the network. And that's the reason. We didn't own the network. We had to negotiate that time with the USA Network and then later Spike and back. But they, for years, it had always been that 1-hour show. And it was actually Nitro going 2 hours. And we said, in order to compete, we've got to have the extra time. So that's why I was just dealing with the network.
One quick question, talking about kind of one of the demises of WCW. I had Hulk Hogan on my podcast. Talk is Jericho, available now. It's free. I asked him what he thought that the one of the reasons why WCW kind of fell off, and he mentioned because he thought that the NWO got too watered down. In the fact at one point there was a red NWO, there was a Latino NWO, there was an NWO with Virgil was in it. I mean, there's just everybody that came from WWE got thrown in the NWO. Do you agree with that statement? How do you feel about that?
Yes and no. I mean, was it a bad idea? Of course, yes. How could you look back at it now and go, okay, well, you probably shouldn't have diluted it as badly as you did. That goes without saying. But I honestly don't think that the result, the future of WCW would have been any different had we not done those things. Because I don't think it was one of those things, one of those various things that were responsible for the demise of NWO, quite frankly.
You guys all right? You want to ask some more questions? Yeah? Okay, how about this guy right here, the NWO with the yellow sweater underneath?
Hey Eric, how you doing? I just want to say that I really enjoyed everything you did for WCW and really made it a very interesting Monday Night War. Fast forward to that, TNA tried to create the Monday Night Wars later on. Granted, a horrible idea at that time. My question to you is this: were you happy with the role they gave you? Because there's a lot of hoopla going on about bringing you and Hogan in, or did you want to have a different role that you think could have really helped the company?
You know, I went there really. I ended up there quite honestly because they wanted Hulk Hogan, and Hulk Hogan wanted me in a position to be able to protect his character. So I was really only there to filter the creative as it related to Hulk Hogan and the things that he was doing on that show. That's why I went there. There was no other reason. And I didn't really have any expectations beyond that, to be honest.
How about you, man?
Eric, if the sale of WCW would have went through and you would have gotten it, I assume that when the contracts have come with it, or would it have still been invincible, and they could choose to take their guaranteed pay and stay home or come with you? And if so, who were you going to use to build the company around? Since guys like Chris and Benoit and Souls.
Yeah, I can't tell you specific names because I honestly just don't remember. You asked a couple of questions there. Yes, the idea was we would have honored the contracts that existed and we would have inherited many of them, if not all of them. As far as who we were planning on building the company around at the time, you know, clearly we had our top guys, we had some of the younger talent that was coming up, and a lot of our better talent had left. So it was kind of like you got to work with what you've got. But I honestly can't tell you, sitting here, that I can remember talking about any one person or building a company around anybody. We were more aware, and I can't tell you, having had many of these conversations at that time, we knew we had to refresh the brand. We knew we had to. My goal was to take it off the air for 3-6 months. I can't remember how long, and kind of take advantage of the absence makes the heart grow fonder factor. Because the brand had been diminished and diluted for so long, and people thought of WCW and Nitro, they thought of a horseshit product. And the only way you can change that is to make it go away and then bring it back and bring it back better. So we knew it had to go away. That's the only thing I really recall in terms of rebuilding that brand.
The last big jump was Vince Russo leaving WWE and going to WCW. And the perception from a lot of people is that Vince Russo had created the Attitude Era. We know that there was a team. We know that Vince always had the final decision. Was it a big coup for you at the time, Eric, to bring in Vince Russo?
I wasn't there, bro.
Oh, you were gone at that point in time.
Yeah, no, I had left September 10th, 1999, is when Harvey Schiller called me up to his office and said, you need to go home. I had 2 years left of my contract, 2.5. He said, Eric, you need to go home. I said, Vince, Harvey, I've got a pay-per-view this weekend. Not anymore, you don't. And it took a few minutes for it to sink in. And I had a great relationship with Harvey. Still do. Ran into him in an airport about a month ago. He was, I don't want to say a mentor, because that would be overstating it, but he had my back to the degree that he could at that time, because even he was vulnerable at that point. But when he let me go, I owned a plane at the time, and I jumped in my plane, flew up to Wyoming, and went fishing. They brought Vince Russo in to replace me. They meaning Bill Bush, I think. So I wasn't a part of that.
Just a few last questions. What to you was the end of the wars? When did the Monday Night Wars end?
Wow. I guess, you look at the momentum of Tyson and WWF taking over, winning, okay, and then not looking back. But the war was still going on. There were still competing. Eric was still challenging Vince, and there were still guys jumping back and forth here and there. But I think, in a big respect, probably around the time that Russo went there, because at that point they lost all vision. They lost any movement forward that they might have had, and it stopped. And then I think they sent Russo home, and then there were so many different people in charge, one right after the other, that at that point I think it was all over. They didn't have any chance of coming back.
How about you?
I saw the end coming in '98. I had a really sick feeling in the pit of my stomach that it was over, but for me the end happened emotionally, mentally, probably March, April '99. I think that was about the time, I don't remember the month really, but that was about the time I remember I was in my office. I was just exhausted. Not only trying to figure out a way to fix the product and manage a company that had, 100 employees and all the things that go along with that. It was mentally and emotionally, I was fighting corporate. I had a much nastier battle going on with Turner executives and the changes that were being required of us than I had trying to fix the show. And I was beat. And I remember Kevin Nash sitting in my office with me, and I couldn't come up with a good idea to save my life. And I was ready to just throw in the towel, and that's what Kevin said, look, let me take over creative for a while. And people can say whatever they want. He didn't do it because he wanted to be that guy. He did it because he saw I was completely out of gas. There was no freaking hope for me at that moment. But that's when I knew it was over for me.
A couple more questions. How about you, man? Been waiting.
Hey, I got a question about the Lucha Wars for Eric. Conan on his MLW podcast is saying that you have a thing for making the luchadors lose their mask, like a mask versus hair match. I remember Jericho took Ubuntu's mask off after he beat him. So I just wonder, was there a thing for you for taking their mask? Did you hang up in your office or something, or anything like that as a decoration?
It's a good question and a fair question. However, nothing even close to that. Look, was it important? Did I believe that Rey Mysterio should have lost his mask? Yes, I did. That was my belief at that time. Good, bad, ugly. Clearly now is the wrong idea, but at the time I believed that Rey was a phenomenal, and he was. I didn't believe it, it was a fact. He was an amazing talent. He was a great looking guy. And I believed that his ability to sell and the audience would react to him even more if they could see his face. And you could see his emotion. I believe that. And it wasn't about, I don't like masks, or I want to take this mask off and put it on my mantle. It was nothing like that. And it was never meant to be disrespectful either. It was meant to go, wait a minute, he's reached this level, he could go to another level.
Well, it seemed like Conan was saying that, you know, it seems like every guy from the Mexican standpoint, when their whole life is the mask. They felt like if they lose the mask, they'll lose their character when they go back to Mexico. But they can't go back to Mexico to work. So they're riding their paychecks pretty much on WCW. So that's...
You know what? And Conan is right about that. And I'll be honest here, it's easy to have 20/20 hindsight. Everybody can be a freaking genius. I can win the Super Bowl the following day, all right? But Conan was right, and I didn't appreciate that aspect of that culture at that time. I didn't. I will be honest about that. But at the same time, I have to tell you, they worked for me. They weren't working, they shouldn't have been working, speaking of Conan, for other people in Mexico while they were under contract for me. That was not supposed to be the deal in most of the cases, not every single one. But, you know, was I worried about, no, I did not worry about whether or not a wrestler losing his mask while he's working for me making 6 figures is going to affect his future in Mexico 5 years from now. I did in fact, maybe it should have, but it didn't.
As a talent, I agree with Eric. You working for the promoter, wherever you are, that's the business. And I'll say this, in Juventude's case, he was more over without the mask than he was with it, because I work with him almost every night.
That's true.
So, it is true. I don't need your, That's true. How about this cat right here with a scarf on? Nice scarf, by the way.
There's 2 quick questions for each guy. First, when the deal with the Keisha fell through, the WCW, was there an option to shop it around the networks? Why didn't you sort of networks? We can kind of pull the towel.
We actually had talked to FX, a gentleman by the name of Peter Liguri, who's still very influential in the business, and Kevin Riley, who worked underneath him. We had actually had a couple of conversations with FX prior to entering into a letter of intent with Turner Broadcasting. We weren't able to do it. We weren't able to make the deal happen quickly enough. There was interest on their part, but it would have taken a year or more for something that big to happen, and we didn't have that time.
And for Bruce, real quick. Vince Russo, everybody knows the story about he recently went to Vince and told him to show son. What was it about Vince Russo that was able to get through to Vince McMahon that nobody else did at that time when he was on the magazine right now?
A different voice. There were a lot of people telling us that. I mean, it did. We had to make change. It was just a different voice.
All right, one more question. This better be the best question of the day. Who's got the best question? If you don't think it's the best question, put your hand down right now. All right, I see a guy over here in a pink shirt. He's got confidence.
Hello, yeah, I've got confidence.
All right, he's from the UK too,
yeah,
so
from
he's
the
a
UK.
smart ass. Okay, tell me your question and I'll tell people what it is because we can't hear you.
Okay, basically, just in terms of the one-upsmanship between the 2 camps, I just wanted to know of any ideas that never saw the light of day that almost did. Any kind of, you know, what ifs almost happened.
Was there any ideas that never saw the light of day when you guys are trying to one-up each other?
Great question.
I'll give you a second, Bruce. I've got one that's on the tip of my tongue. And you'll appreciate this, because it involves Kiss and Gene Simmons. The reason I brought Gene in, when I did the way I did, was because the plan was, on December 31st, 1999, to have a pay-per-view in Tempe, Arizona, at the, what's a college football championship? They have their, right? Sun Bowl. And the game was going to be on, it was either January 1st, or I think it was January 1st. We were going to do the event from the Sun Dome and time it in such a way that the finish was going to come East Coast time at 11:59:59. Okay?
1, 2, 3. Happy New Year.
Yeah, that was because if you remember, it's hard to remember this now, but back then people were kind of semi-seriously thinking, oh my God, the world's going to come to an end, computers are no longer going to work, you know, power grids are going to go down, it was going to be this huge, you know, thing.
Y2K.
Yeah, and Exactly. And the idea was to have Kiss at one end of the stadium performing, and then a match, and then a song, and then a match, and a song and a match. That was why we brought them in, and that was the idea of going, how do we pull the nose up on this son of a bitch? We got to do something big, and that was the big that we were going to try to do. And believe it or not, the reason it never happened was mostly because a lot of production people, they didn't work for me. They worked for Turner Broadcasting. They didn't work for Eric Bischoff or WCW. They didn't want to work. They didn't want to work, number one, over a holiday, and then because they would have to go in a week early or 5 days early, start setting up. They didn't want to be flying anywhere on December 31st, 1999. And they just refused basically to do it.
Because they were worried that the world was going to end or whatever?
They just didn't want to do it.
Was there originally supposed to be 4 Kiss members? Because you had the Kiss Demon. Was Gene's plan to have a Star Child and a Spaceman and a Catman?
You know, I remember the first time I met Gene, and I want to tell a real quick story because I know we want to wrap this up, but I met Gene at the Beverly Hills Hotel in Beverly Hills, and I don't remember how I got set up and who reached out to who, I just don't. But I walked in, if you've been in the Beverly Hills Hotel, right? It's where all the Hollywood yuckity-yucks meet, and, you know, bigwigs. And I walked into the bar, I don't know, bar restaurant area, and Gene was sitting in a booth by himself, and he had he had merchandise stacked from the floor to the ceiling behind the table. And there was Gene Simmons sitting there. And I think Gene did have some ideas of introducing characters and extending his license, you know, within the wrestling community. So I do recall having some of those conversations, but I don't remember how far any of them really went.
Could have had Kiss versus the Blood Runs Cold guys.
That would have worked.
Bruce, did you think of anything?
You know, the only one I can really think of is you know, it's kind of those what if type deal. And during the time when we were negotiating with Brett, Hulk's contract with WCW was also coming due, and they had an option to either match any offer, so on and so forth, going back and forth. And Hulk had expressed interest in coming back. And the idea was one of, basically it would have been Hulk being the guy to take the title, and Hulk kind of passing the torch to Steve at WrestleMania, but like Hulk kind of heading up the DX, if you will, group in that way, going that way. And it was all the creative of it. The creative of it.
Hogan was going to be the head of DX?
Well, again, the creative of it wasn't completely fleshed out.
That was an idea.
That was an idea, yeah, to kind of get us to where we needed to go.
Suck it, brother.
Yeah. 2 words for you. But I mean, that was something in negotiations just kind of broke down in the middle, and it didn't go much further than that. And I know we're going to wrap up, so you guys can go see the Royal Rumble. But I do have to share something with you. Eric and I started talking a few months ago, and we talk every once in a while. And whenever we would have a few beers, we would talk about business, what have you, and everything. And we each have, as you can see, different viewpoints on the business and what happened during those times. Doesn't make one right or one wrong. It's just different. We were on different sides. And he had the idea, says, man, he goes, well, we took this on the road. He goes, this could be something else. And this was a germ of an idea that we talked about on the phone, made a couple phone calls, and this happened. And I cannot tell you just how truly overwhelmed and humbled I am to be sitting here today and to have this many people come out in this godforsaken weather and listen to us tell our stories and share some of the things that we've been through in a business that I truly love and am very passionate about. And then to have Chris Jericho, upon hearing about the idea, volunteer his services to come and be a part of this, man, we were blown away. And I want to thank Chris, I want to thank Eric, most importantly, I want to thank you guys for coming out. This has been a blast. Thank you very, very much.
Final thoughts?
I'm sick of hearing my own voice at this point, so I'm sure you are too. But I reiterate everything Bruce just said, ×2. Chris, thank you very, very much. Very much.
Thank you guys, it was a blast. Go have a good time today at the Rumble.